So Matchroom show coming up this Saturday, January the 31st at the O2. Originally had Anthony Joshua versus Kevin Johnson as a headline. That's now gone due to Anthony Joshua's back injury, as we know. Initial thoughts on this show. As I say, initial thoughts. Weak. No star power. You know, being headlined by guys like John Ryder, Kevin Mitchell. These are guys we've seen lose in domestic fights to, Billy Joe Saunders, Ricky Burns. My initial gut instinct is it lacks star power, especially for a London night at the O2, Sky Sports Saturday night. You just expect slightly bigger names on the bill. It's certainly a weaker card, in my opinion, than Frank Warren's card on February the 28th, which I guess is the rival for now. Now, whilst it is weak in terms of the names on the card, I don't think there's too many people who'll disagree with me on that. What we have got is a situation where there are actually the top four bouts, in my opinion, are pretty 50-50. This card could go one of two ways. If the fights are competitive, entertaining, if the styles work, it could be a really good night for the hardcore boxing fans. Of the top four fights, there aren't very many there aren't any that I expect to end by quick knockouts. None of them are fights that I view as easy to call. It is really gritty, competitive action for the hardcore fans, and that should be applauded. But what I think is Eddie Hearn's gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. He's gone from the awful pay-per-view where there was no competitive fights to a night like Saturday night, which has, admittedly 50-50 action, but a lack of a star draw. That's my particular opinion. I think we want to see a blend of the two. And because of that, it is unfortunate that Anthony Joshua versus Kevin Johnson isn't on the bill, because Joshua's got that excitement, that profile, that buzz about his career. Now, as for these fights, just briefly, let's talk Kevin Mitchell first. Kevin Mitchell is fighting Estrada. Now, the majority of UK fans probably know Estrada. I think it's fair to say in a similar way to I do. When we watched the Kell Brook versus Sean Porter undercard, he was fighting Omar Figueroa. What was a very, very good fight. I do think there could be a scope for an upset in this one. I think Kevin Mitchell is the more skilled boxer, possibly the more talented technician, etc. My reasons for that with Kevin Mitchell is, he's a guy who's now in his 30s. He's just turned 30. I think he's had something like 40 professional fights. My point is, he's getting older. He's got a lot of miles on the clock. Let's factor in that this is a guy who struggles with his weight. He's cutting a lot of weight to make the lightweight limit. So you've got guys getting older, been in a lot of wars, got some miles on the clock, and he's going to face an opponent who, against Figueroa, was so young, so hungry, and came and really gave it his all. It was a violent brawl, that fight. And although Figueroa was getting the better of it, Estrada was really, really tough, really gritty, not afraid whatsoever to get stuck in. Now, if we look at Kevin Mitchell, we've seen him stopped twice by Ricky Burns and by Katsidas. I knew it would come to me. We also, in his last fight, again, I think the guy's name was Maduma, saw him get outboxed for the majority of the fight, and he was actually, behind on the scorecards before he got stopped in that, before he stopped the opponent in that fight. So this Estrada, I think, has got some potential here, because Kevin Mitchell is at a potentially vulnerable stage in his career. Now, I don't think that Estrada is bringing sort of boxing fundamentals and boxing skills to outbox Kevin. I think Kevin's too slick, he's got too much ability, and I don't think Estrada is that talented a technician. So I don't see the fight going that way. But what I would say is, in the Katsidas fight, a fighter who got on Kevin's chest, who roughed him up, who brought the game in close, who fought in the pocket, we saw him have success, and we saw him able to hurt Kevin Mitchell and stop him. I think the way Estrada fought against Figueroa, there's scope for that to happen again. And I think with Kevin Mitchell getting older, with him having so much miles on the clock, with him cutting so much weight to get down to lightweight, I think if this goes around to round 7, 8, 9, 10, You know, and this guy looked like he's the kind of guy who's going to keep coming, keep getting in close, keep roughing Mitchell up. I think it could be a really, really tough fight for Mitchell. I view this as 50-50. I think Mitchell brings the skill. I think Figueroa maybe has the style to beat Mitchell, and I think he's maybe catching Mitchell at the right time. So my inclination would be to go for Estrada. You know, as I say, 50-50. I'm not super strong one way or the other, but it's a real tough fight to call. The other main fight, an interesting one. We've got John Ryder versus a guy from Argentina called Godoy. Now, this Godoy has fought Jorge Sebastian Highland, twice. This is the guy, Jorge Sebastian Highland, who took out Macklin. Now, the first fight, Godoy outboxed Highland, and I've watched that fight, en route to a 12-round unanimous decision. In the second fight, Highland was able to stop Godoy in 12 rounds. So my point is, this guy has gone 24 rounds with the guy who's just knocked out Matthew Macklin, and he's outpointed him over the first 12. This guy has some talent. This guy has some ability. This is actually a better fight, in my opinion, than the initial fight that involved the Australian, Les Sherrington, I think his name is. Now, with regards to this Godoy, yeah, I've looked at his record. He's not the biggest puncher. I think he's got something like 3 losses, and he has been stopped 2 or 3 times in his career. So he is a guy who John Ryder could hurt, could get out of there. But my instinct is that's not going to happen. John Ryder, in my eyes, I just don't see him as the biggest puncher out there. I also don't view him as the most dynamic boxer. For me, he's quite one-dimensional in the way he plods forward. He's not the most powerful. And even though he was effective in the Billy Joe Saunders fight, essentially he lost that fight to a guy with more movement, perhaps a bit more athleticism, perhaps a bit more skill in terms of hand speed, footwork, you know, amateur pedigree, etc. So I think this is a 50-50 fight again, because John Ryder's going to need to be at his absolute best to get the job done. I'm not going to pretend I've seen too much of this Godoy fight, but I've watched a few of his fights, and he seems like a guy who can throw a combination, who can move a little bit, you know, he's got decent accuracy. How defensively sound he is, I don't know. But we also know that he's got the capability to go late in fights, to go 12 rounds, to get involved in wars. And with Ryder's lack of, in my opinion, power, and with this guy having gone 12 before with the guy who knocked Macklin out, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if this went to points. Yeah, I could see this one going late. And with that in mind, is sort of John Ryder being a bit of a plodder, slightly one-dimensional, not the quickest guy, not the most athletic guy, could that count against him? Against an opponent who's outpointed Jorge Sebastian Highland? I think very possible. Again, if I'm completely honest, whilst this is a 50-50 fight, whilst I don't have a strong impression here, if I had to pick one or the other, I'd go for the Argentinian based on the limited footage I've seen. My point is, this could be a bad night for Matchrioom. You've got 4 big fights on the bill. The other ones are the Ricky Boylan, Tommy Martin, John Wade Hibbard, Tyler Goodjohn. You know, Tyler Goodjohn's never involved in a boring fight. He's a great guy to watch, big fan of his. Those should be gritty, tough fights. They should be interesting. But the point is, this isn't a card that's going to excite the casual fans. This isn't a card that is going to get people rushing home from the pub on a Saturday night or rushing home from the football to watch this. This is a fan for us boxing, guys, and I think the worry for Eddie Hearn and Matchrioom is that their 2 main guys here, John Ryder and Kevin Mitchell, get beaten. I understand why Kevin Mitchell's in a tough fight. He's at a difficult stage of his career. He needs to be involved in these kind of fights to get himself towards world title level. The John Ryder fight, I'm not sure about. I agree Ryder's opposition needed to be stepped up. He wasn't moving in the right direction. But just like the Macklin-Highland fight, is there a bit of a problem with the risk-reward here? You're going in against a tough guy who can beat your man. He's not really highly ranked. He's not known by the public. He's not highly regarded. I hate to keep saying this, but why didn't we see John Ryder versus Spike O'Sullivan? That's the fight that would have really got the public behind it. That's maybe a more winnable fight than this one. For me, the risk-reward for John Ryder just doesn't stack up with this guy. As I say, 4 really tight 50-50 fights. I'm looking forward to watching them. I just question, does this card lack the star power? And could Matchroom's two main boys, Mitchell and Ryder, get done on Saturday night? I think that's very possible. Please leave your predictions in the comments and let me know your thoughts on the bill as a whole. Thanks very much for watching.